Imagine this. You're standing in the wreckage of a life you once thought was solid, foundation crumbled, walls collapsed, dreams buried beneath the dust of loss. Everything is quiet now. No one is calling. No one is coming. Just you and the silence. And for the first time, that silence is screaming. You scan the landscape of your ruin. Not just what's outside, but the inner ruin too. The place where identity used to live. The story you told yourself about who you were. The confidence that once cushioned you. All of it broken. And yet, somehow, you're still here. Why? That question echoes louder than the collapse. Why do you keep breathing when it hurts to be alive? Why do your legs still carry you forward when your mind is paralyzed by doubt? Why is your heart still beating when every part of you aches to stop? There's something ancient about this moment. Something primal. You can feel it, beneath the despair, beneath the confusion. A flicker. Not hope. Not yet. But something more raw. More real. Survival? Maybe. But what if it's something deeper than survival? What if this pain, this disorientation, this collapse, this unraveling is not the end of you, but the beginning? We were taught to run from pain, conditioned to treat it like an intruder, something to silence, something to numb. But what if that's the lie? What if pain is not your enemy, but your alchemist? What if this breaking isn't breaking you, but burning off who you're not? Let's press further. How many people have you seen hide behind smiles that didn't reach their eyes? How many successful, confident faces have you witnessed crumble the moment something real touched them? How many times have you broken silently because the world told you strong people don't feel like this? But what if they do? What if real strength isn't the absence of suffering, but the willingness to feel it without running? What if the rawness of your agony is not your weakness, but your initiation? Think of it. Every myth worth remembering begins with a descent. Into the forest, into the underworld, into madness. And no hero, no warrior, no soul seeker ever became whole by walking a path made of comfort. So why should you? Is it possible that what hurts the most is exactly where your greatest truth lives? You weren't born to remain unscarred. You were born to evolve. And evolution has never been clean, never been painless. It rips and tears and burns. It destroys comfort. It humiliates ego. It exposes lies. But in its wake, there is something terrifying and beautiful. Strength that can't be taken away. Not the kind of strength that needs applause or praise. Not the performance of resilience. I'm talking about something else entirely, an inner gravity. A weight that grounds you. A silence that speaks louder than noise. A presence that says, I have suffered, and I am still here. But to find a kind of strength, you have to stop running. You have to walk back into the fire. You have to listen to what the pain is saying, not with your ears, but with your soul. Because pain has a voice. It speaks a language older than words. It is trying to show you something you were never taught to see. Something your parents never explained. Something your culture tried to bury. But it's still there. Buried in your bones. Etched in your nervous system. Waiting. Not for permission. Not for perfection. But for your attention. So I'll ask you again. What if pain doesn't come to punish you? What if pain comes to transform you? And what if the reason you've suffered so long is because no one ever showed you how to translate it? We're going to do that now. We're going to look behind the veil, into the psychological and philosophical roots of why we suffer, how society has betrayed our relationship with pain, and how to reclaim the forgotten power it offers us. But first, pause. Feel what you're feeling right now. The tension in your chest, the ache in your gut, the tears you won't let fall. That's not weakness. That's the door. And once you open it, nothing will ever be the same. Like this so far? Subscribe and stay with me. What we're about to uncover will change the way you see yourself and your pain forever. Now, let's go deeper. Let's begin with something uncomfortable. Not all pain is created by trauma. Not all suffering is the result of injustice, betrayal, or tragedy. Some pain, maybe the most persistent kind, comes from a quiet war within you. A war you don't talk about. Because you barely know it's happening. Because you were never taught to see it. Because it wears masks, busyness, achievement, perfection, avoidance. And it all begins with this silent, poisonous belief. I should not feel this way. Carl Jung called this the beginning of all inner chaos, the moment we split. The moment we start believing that some parts of us are acceptable and others are shameful. The moment we bury pieces of ourselves in the dark, thinking we've gotten rid of them. But the unconscious doesn't forget. And pain? Pain is its messenger. When Jung said, "I'd rather be whole than good," he was pointing toward this very conflict. You've been conditioned to aim for goodness, acceptance, success, but not for wholeness. Not for truth. Because truth hurts. And wholeness requires you to touch your pain. Society reinforces this at every turn. From childhood, you were taught to smile even when you didn't feel like it. To be polite instead of honest. To suppress tears because big kids don't cry. To succeed even when you're suffocating. To call burnout grind. To call anxiety motivation. You were taught to view pain as a flaw, something to overcome, deny, or medicate. Never something to understand. That's the hidden problem. We don't know how to suffer. We know how to distract ourselves. We know how to bury our grief in screens, routines, substances, and surface-level affirmations. But we don't know how to sit with discomfort, to feel shame and not run, to touch sorrow and not drown. And because of that, we suffer more than we need to. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that suffering was the default state of human existence, not because life is inherently cruel, but because desire itself is suffering. We want things to be other than they are. We want life without its harshness, love without risk, growth without loss, strength without scars. But real growth? Real awakening? It's born from pain, not bypassed by pleasure. Nietzsche went even further. He dared to say, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But that quote has been defanged by self-help culture. Nietzsche didn't mean that you should simply push through. He meant something darker and more profound, that only through pain do we touch the raw materials of transformation, that only in the fire does the ego burn enough to reveal what lies beneath. Pain, he believed, was sacred, but only if we faced it consciously, only if we chose to engage with it. And here's the paradox. Most of us are in pain constantly, but we're doing everything we can not to notice. We call it stress. We call it burnout. We call it, "I'm just tired." But beneath those labels is something far deeper, an unresolved self, a soul screaming for reunion. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, understood this better than most. In Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." He discovered that even in unimaginable suffering, the soul could still choose how it responded. That pain, while brutal, could also be meaningful. That meaning was not found in escaping pain, but in turning toward it and asking it, "What now?" That question is the gateway, but only if you ask it with humility. Only if you stop trying to fix, solve, or escape and start trying to listen. Jean-Paul Sartre once said that man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. In a world without inherent meaning, we must create it. And creation is messy, painful, existentially disorienting. But that's also where freedom lives. You are not just the product of your biology or your past. You are the sum of your choices, especially the choice of how you relate to suffering. So let's strip it bare. The problem isn't that pain exists. The problem is that we believe it shouldn't. That belief, that pain is unnatural, shameful, or a personal failure, is what creates hell. We've medicalized suffering, spiritualized it, moralized it. But what if pain is simply part of what it means to be conscious? To feel fully? To evolve? Aldous Huxley wrote that experience is not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you. So what are you doing with your pain? Are you using it to hide or to wake up? Because every ache in your chest, every betrayal, every tear you swallowed instead of cried, has left an imprint, not just in your mind, but in your body, in your nervous system, in the stories you tell, in the person you think you are. And if you never question that story, if you never trace your pain to its source, if you never dare to face it instead of flee, then pain won't make you stronger. It will make you smaller. it will shrink your soul. It will mold you into a version of yourself that exists only to avoid feeling again. And that is not strength. That is surrender. But it doesn't have to be that way. Because there is another path. One that doesn't deny pain. One that doesn't glorify it either. But one that uses it. A path where pain becomes fuel. Where darkness becomes direction. Where breakdown becomes breakthrough. And that path begins with seeing what pain has already cost you and what it's still shaping in your life when you're not paying attention. Let's go there next. You wake up, you dress, you work, you smile, and yet, somewhere, something feels off. A low-grade hum beneath the surface, a constant tension in your chest, that quiet question echoing in your mind. Why does this still hurt? But you ignore it. You've learned to. Because the world taught you how to function while fractured, how to perform success while carrying invisible wounds, how to keep going, without ever asking where you're going or why. This is the first unseen consequence of unprocessed pain. You become emotionally fluent in pretending. You learn how to look stable while breaking inside, how to laugh without joy, how to say, "I'm fine," like it's a survival spell. And you forget what real presence feels like, because most of your energy goes toward maintaining your mask. Pain, when ignored, doesn't vanish. It mutates. It becomes your baseline, your default state. It becomes tension in your shoulders you never notice. It becomes insomnia, fatigue, irritability. It becomes bitterness disguised as standards, control disguised as boundaries, fear disguised as independence. You think you're healed because you've learned how to manage life on top of the wound. But the wound is still running the show. And this is the second consequence. Unseen pain creates unconscious patterns. Your mind, brilliant as it is, was never designed to carry the weight of years of emotional repression without consequence. So it adapts. It rewires. It builds defense mechanisms so subtle you call them personality traits. You say, "I just don't let people in. I don't get attached. I don't need anyone." But is that truth or trauma talking? Cognitive psychology calls this confirmation bias. Once wounded, you unconsciously seek out people and situations that affirm your internal narrative. That love isn't safe. That closeness leads to pain. That vulnerability is weakness. That your emotions are too much. So you repeat the cycle. You attract what you fear. You sabotage what you crave. You chase what won't love you and run from what will. Why? Because it's familiar. Because your nervous system doesn't crave healing, it craves what it knows. Pain programs you to expect pain. And the moment you experience peace, a voice inside whispers, "This won't last. Something's going to go wrong." That voice isn't paranoia. It's memory. Memory encoded into your emotional wiring. And until you name it, until you bring it into the light, it drives everything. The third unseen consequence is the erosion of authenticity. The more you armor yourself against feeling, the more disconnected you become from your own truth. You begin to make decisions not from desire, but from avoidance. Not from inspiration, but from fear. Not from curiosity, but from control. You stop asking, "What do I want?" and instead ask, "What will keep me safe?" But safe becomes a prison. It keeps you from taking risks, from opening again, from trusting, from growing. You become emotionally cautious, philosophically numb, psychologically starved. And all the while, you tell yourself you're just being smart, being strong, being independent. But deep down, you're exhausted, because performing strength is more draining than living vulnerably. And here's where it gets darker. Unprocessed pain doesn't just shape your life. It shapes the world around you. It seeps into parenting, where fear becomes control, into leadership, where insecurity becomes tyranny, into art, where avoidance becomes superficiality, into culture, where unresolved collective wounds repeat across generations through war, oppression, and disconnection, Entire systems of belief and politics are built around the fear of feeling, around the illusion of control, around the denial of vulnerability. And the result? A world addicted to distractions, to stimulation without substance, to movement without depth. Because looking inward requires a courage most were never taught to cultivate. We idolize the stoic, the unbothered, the emotionally distant. But is that real power, or repressed pain polished into a persona? Let's return to psychology for a moment. Studies in trauma neuroscience show that repressed emotions don't just live in the brain, they live in the body. The body keeps score. Unacknowledged grief becomes chronic fatigue. Unspoken rage becomes inflammation. Silenced terror becomes hypervigilance. And then we wonder why we feel empty, tired, disconnected. Pain not faced becomes pain lived. And pain lived long enough becomes identity. You start to believe, I am broken. I am too sensitive. I am beyond help. But none of that is true. You're not broken. You're buried. Buried under decades of conditioning. Buried under a culture that punishes feeling. Buried under layers of self-protection that have calcified into walls. And this is the final consequence. You forget who you are, not in a poetic, mystical sense, in a literal, neurological sense. Because every time you override your pain, every time you numb your truth, every time you choose silence instead of expression, you disconnect from the most sacred compass you have, your feeling self. And without that compass, you're not navigating your life. You're reacting to it. You build a life that looks good from the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. A beautiful cage, an impressive prison. And the worst part? You think it's normal, because everyone else is doing the same. But it's not normal. It's just common. And common isn't the same as true. Truth doesn't hide behind safety. It demands presence. It demands courage. It demands that you stop escaping long enough to feel the full weight of what your pain has been trying to tell you. Because when you finally do, when you let the pain speak, it shows you the way out. Not the way back to who you were, but the way forward, toward who you were meant to become. And that, my friend, is where transformation begins. But to get there, you'll need to do something radical. Something that goes against every instinct conditioned into you. You'll need to rebel. What if everything you were taught about strength is a lie? What if strength isn't found in control, perfection, or avoidance, but in surrender? Not surrender as weakness, but surrender as a radical act of rebellion. Imagine standing in front of the wreckage of your inner world, not trying to fix it, not trying to erase it, but planting your feet and saying, "This is mine, and I am not ashamed." That's where it begins. Not with escape, not with performance, but with ownership. This is the rebellion. Not the loud, external kind. Not the kind with raised fists or shouted slogans, but the quiet revolution of looking inward and refusing to flinch. Because if pain has been the architect of your prison, then rebellion is your blueprint for freedom. Let's start by tearing down the oldest lie, that healing is about becoming better. It's not. Healing is not about becoming a shinier version of yourself. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to hide. It's about choosing to feel what you've avoided. Choosing to sit in the fire and let it melt away everything that isn't real. Nietzsche called this the path of the overman, the one who transcends not by escaping pain, but by integrating it. The one who descends into their own depths and reemerges forged, not fragile. Hardened by experience, softened by truth. To rebel in this way is to turn toward the monster you've been running from, and realize it's been trying to hand you a mirror. You were taught to slay your dragons. But no one told you that sometimes the dragon is your shadow, your unloved parts, your forgotten memories, your silenced rage. And those things, they don't want to be killed. They want to be seen. Because the real war isn't between you and your pain. It's between you and your refusal to listen to what your pain is trying to teach you. Carl Jung called this process shadow work. the conscious integration of what we've exiled from awareness. And integration is messy. It doesn't happen in therapy buzzwords or Instagram quotes. It happens in the middle of the night, when your chest aches and your mind races. It happens when you're finally honest enough to say, "I am not okay," and brave enough to stay with that truth without trying to fix it. Rebellion means choosing presence over distraction. It means turning off the noise and sitting in the silence you feared. It means asking, "What am I really feeling right now? Where did this begin? What part of me have I buried to survive?" And it means listening to the answer without judgment. This kind of rebellion isn't easy. It costs you your illusions, your excuses, your coping mechanisms. But what you get in return is real power. Not the power to control others, the power to own yourself. Jean-Paul Sartre said that freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. That's the essence of the rebellion, reclaiming authorship over your life. Not blaming, not bypassing, but creating. Creating meaning from madness. Creating beauty from scars. Creating art from agony. Think of every soul who has ever inspired you, not because they were perfect, but because they survived. Frida Kahlo painted her pain. James Baldwin wrote through his. Malcolm X transformed his. And you? You can transmute yours. But it requires a shift. From, "Why did this happen to me?" to "What can I do with what happened?" From "I am broken" to "I am breaking open." From "How do I stop the pain?" to "How do I become worthy of it?" Because your pain is not random. It is not meaningless. It is a doorway to your deepest potential. The rebellion is not just feeling your pain, it's using it. Using it to create, to connect, to speak, to build, to love. Pain taught you boundaries. It taught you depth. It taught you empathy, compassion, courage. You didn't gain those qualities in moments of ease. You earned them in the fire. So don't run from your scars. Trace them, understand them, name them, then wear them like armor made of truth. This is how you break free, not by denying who you've been, but by redefining what it means, not by erasing the past, but by reclaiming it. As the training ground for your awakening, you've already paid the price of suffering. Now claim the reward. The freedom to live as someone who is no longer afraid of themselves. Because once you stop being afraid of what's inside you, no one outside you can control you. That's the ultimate rebellion. And yet, there's something even deeper, a final, almost unbearable truth, one that doesn't just explain pain, but transcends it. We've walked through the fire. Now it's time to see what lies on the other side. It comes quietly, not with thunder, not with glory, not in the moment of triumph, but in the quiet after the storm, when you sit alone with nothing left to prove and everything stripped away. That's when it arrives. Not as an answer, but as a presence, a knowing, a realization so deep it doesn't speak in words, but in recognition. You were never meant to be invincible. You were meant to be whole, and wholeness requires that you feel it all. The joy and the agony, the pride and the shame, the light and the shadow. Pain was never here to destroy you. Pain was here to reveal you. Because only what breaks can show you what was unbreakable. Only what is lost can make space for what's true. Only when you dissolve can you touch the part of you that was never constructed to begin with. There's a truth that all mystics, poets, and survivors eventually learn, not in books, not in lectures, but in their bones. The soul doesn't grow in comfort. It expands in collapse. It deepens in loss. It awakens in despair. It becomes real in the places that hurt the most. Because pain, when faced, becomes not a curse, but a consecration. It's the death of illusion. The death of roles you never chose but thought you had to play. The death of borrowed beliefs and hand-me-down expectations. And after the death, rebirth. Not as someone new, but as someone ancient, someone you forgot. The child who once felt deeply, before being told it was too much. The dreamer who once believed in meaning, before being taught it was naive. The seeker who once knew there was more, before being shamed into silence. You are not here to numb yourself into perfection. You are here to wake up into presence, into aliveness, into the raw, messy, unbearable beauty of being human. And being human means you will hurt, you will lose, you will fall. But those moments are not your enemy. They're your teachers. They're your initiations. They're your return. Return to what? To your soul, to your strength, to your unshakable center. Because here's the ultimate truth, the one you feel deep down but have never dared to name. You were not broken by your pain. You were broken open. Open enough to feel again. Open enough to see differently. Open enough to care about things that truly matter. Your suffering wasn't meaningless. It was meaning in motion. Every moment of heartbreak, it taught you tenderness. Every betrayal, it taught you discernment. Every time you were brought to your knees, it taught you how to stand from the inside out. And now, you carry something no one can steal. Live truth. You don't need to prove anything. You've become the proof. Proof that darkness is not the end, only a doorway. Proof that wounds don't make you weak, they make you real. Proof that the ones who've walked through fire and stayed open are the ones who become light for others. You want strength? It's not in your ability to avoid pain. It's in your willingness to walk through it with your eyes open. Strength is choosing to love again after being shattered. Strength is telling the truth even when your voice trembles. Strength is standing alone when necessary, so your soul doesn't have to. You were told to armor up, but armor doesn't protect you, it separates you. You were told to get over it, but you don't get over pain. You go through it. You digest it. You sit with it long enough to learn its name. And then it becomes part of your strength, not your shame. Because the final truth is this: your pain is the doorway to your power. Not because suffering is noble, not because agony is required, but because in walking through what others avoid, you find what others never reach. A soul that is sovereign, a heart that is open, a mind that is clear, a life that is yours, truly yours. This is the path of the alchemist, the one who turns suffering into self, the one who doesn't just survive, but transcends. So here you are, changed, still healing, still unfolding, but no longer asleep. And now the only question left is this: what will you do with what broke you? Will you bury it again in silence and shame? Or will you speak it, share it, build with it? Not as a wound, but as a weapon of light, because that's what pain becomes when you've faced it fully. Not a prison, but a path. Not your weakness, but your wisdom. You've made it through the fire. Now build something with the ashes. Something honest, something sacred, something real. And if someone asks how you became so strong, you'll smile and say, I stopped running from myself and started listening to the pain.